Hello and welcome to Bookish and Imbalance, the podcast that talks about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful of mental health in the queer book community. I'm Adrienne J. Smith.
I'm Amy Spencer.
And I'm Katie Trapp.
We all have a state of mental health and we neglect talking about it often, or worse yet, we are ashamed to talk about it. So we are here to break the stigma. And on today's episode, we're interviewing narrator and author Aven Shorekind, or if you're in the Sapphic community, you will know her as Tessa Stavers. So Aven also writes books, although I don't know what name you write them under.
Aven Shorekind.
Yeah, okay. I was like, I thought it was, but I wasn't sure at first. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself as an author and a narrator as a quick introduction?
Sure. I've been narrating for almost 10 years now. I've narrated 300 some books. I narrate a range of genres, and I work really hard to not get compartmentalized in my work, so that I end up doing a big variety. And my LGBTQ narration's popular as Tessa Stavers. I have another pseudonym for the straight romance that I do, and I wrote a book in 2022, was my second anyway, about a teenager making a gender discovery journey, and I'm living in the East Coast of Canada, and I've been a firefighter and a tax return preparer and a bartender and a professional snowboarder and and a builder. That was my main prior career, was in construction. So that's my past.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Oh, well, a lot of things. Yeah. but it's surprising how much of that comes into play in narrating, because all of these industries, they have their own vocabularies. All these cultures. We have our own vocabulary. So when I get to narrate a romance that's firefighters or EMTs, I'm like, I know how to say those things. Those specialized words that come up. Mm-hmm.
I was writing a book with TV Markinson, and my husband works in a grocery store, for context, and we were writing a book about a bookstore, and we needed to know what the thing was that you scan. Like, it's not the scanner, the register, but the ones that the employees use to like scan the back of everything. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And so I asked my husband, and he just rattles off these numbers, and I just stared at him like, radio. I think I'm just going to say scanning thingy, because most people are not going to know what you just said. But yeah, it is fun to see all those different languages. And also, just, have you always lived on the East Coast of Canada, or you lived around?
No, I lived I was born on the East Coast, but then I was 25 years on the West Coast in the Pacific Northwest, in mostly BC, but Alberta and the Yukon and Washington and Oregon.
Because those
now I'm back.
The accent changes, right?
Oh my God.
The slight differences. It's because I grew up primarily in the Midwest of the US, and my editor is always like, that's a very Midwestern thing to say. And I'm like, yes, it is. And I did not realize how bad it was.
Yeah, it was a lot to learn, becoming a narrator and needing to speak American, because Canadian has a lot of Canadian has a lot of dialect things. We're like midway, we've retained a lot of British pronunciation, particularly, and spelling, as you might know. Yeah.
Just spelling it the right way, basically, not knocking vowels out of the middle of words.
Americans are so haphazard with vowels. We don't need them. Yeah.
So as a narrator, you're stuck in a little box, like literally and figuratively.
Literally. 4 feet square. Mm-hmm.
And I guess it can be quite an isolating profession. Like there's probably like a whole host of emotions which you can feel through that. Can you like share with us, because we're all authors and we have our own host of emotions we
Boxes.
deal with from sitting in our little just like what sort of like mental kind of like gymnastics you go through when you're narrating a book.
Well, it's not dissimilar to writing, is that you're producing a thing that you have no immediate feedback for. So you produce the thing, and far after you've done it, you find out whether people like it or not. So you're really on your own with your critic, by yourself, and then unlike being an author, when you're narrating, you're performing somebody else's work. So our job is to give those words the emotion that the author intends. So you're constantly carrying this idea of like of interpretation, of going, what did the author intend here, and am I expressing it adequately or well? That's the primary difference, I'd say, from authoring. But it's self-directed. You got to get yourself in here on your own. It's a like all the creative professions, it's subjective. So you can't control how everybody responds, and you still have to be okay with it.
I don't really know anything about narrating. How, like, do you, this is just for my own interest. Are you involved with the author? Like, get any kind of feedback from them themselves?
So there's various degrees of that. When we work with a publisher, you have none. The standard is to have zero contact with the author at all. When I first read the book and there are names and places that are made up, and I need to know how the author intended those to be pronounced, they have to go through a go-between. I send the email, they send it to the author, it comes back. But when I work directly with an author, then there's quite a bit, right up to the point where I at times will narrate live on Discord, and the author can listen to me work live as their fans can as well. Listen to the book being made. Not everybody does that. I'm one that does sometimes. So that's very immediate. What's standard is, when working with an indie author, is to establish that they have confidence in you by giving a 15-minute sample, and making sure all your pronunciations are right. And if they care about, a couple of characters, how they sound, are we going to check that I've got those character voices satisfactory? So that's a little back and forth at the beginning, but typically after you get that initial approval, I run with it. I finish the book, which can be totally private. Sometimes I don't go live. And then I hand over an 11-hour book 2 weeks later, right? So there are degrees, but when it's a publisher, especially when the publisher has bought the rights from the author, there's almost no contact.
That was, I think for me, the most fascinating thing when I met you was just talking, because I met Aven at 20 Books to Vegas in November, and we both work with the same audio publisher. And so it was, for me, just I think we both work with two audio publishers, but we met through one. It was just interesting to talk about kind of the back end, like how it works for the author with the audio publisher, and then how it also works for the narrator with the audio publisher, because we really don't ever communicate with our narrators when it's through a publisher.
Mm-hmm. That's some strange tradition.
Yeah. I imagine there's somewhat of a protection there as well,
Yeah.
just for the author, and then as well as with the narrator, in that if I really don't like what you did, I don't have to talk to you and tell you that. I could tell somebody else.
True.
But just to make it clear, Aven has not narrated any of my books, and I am not dissatisfied with any of her work.
Uh,
Little disclaimer there.
Disclaimer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for disclaimer's sake, Aven has narrated one of my favourite books.
Really?
Which book?
Yes.
Share the details.
I am a massive fan of the Eve Sumpter series by Jordan Kelly.
Ooh. Oh wow. I'm doing a podcast with Jordan next week.
Yeah. So
That is an excellent example of a journey, because Jordan Kelly, who authored the Eve Sumpter series, she trusted me early, and I was not as good a narrator as I am now, and there were years between, and she has written books since I started narrating her books. She has written more, and I've narrated them, and it's it's
there's like 20 between when she wrote the first Eve Sumpter book and when she wrote the last Eve Sumpter book last year.
And I narrated them out of order, I know, because she was doing the current ones, and then she went back to get so
But that brings up the point of building the relationship. Like, that's one of the advantages to being indie and being able to work directly with narrators, is building that relationship. You know, and even beyond that too, I broke the line of communication and messaged one of the narrators that I was working with. And I'm sure she was like, but also I had met her previously, so it's not like it was completely out of the blue. But just kind of continuing to build that relationship is really nice. And, you know, to be able to message and be like, I just got the proofs and it sounds amazing, you know, is always fun. And I think for me, just to learn more about different aspects of the business as well. And there's readers really attached to narrators too. So if I can build a relationship with a narrator and continue to work with them, why not?
So as a narrator, you're dealing with books that aren't your own, and presumably getting in deep with the characters and writing, like immersing yourself into that whole little world. I know that narrators are just as affected by books as readers, if not more so in some cases. How does narrating a particularly emotional book that deals with mental health affect your mental health?
Okay, so sometimes I'm unconscious of it, and it's not always what you'd expect. Sometimes a book that's really challenging technically, where there's a lot of tense shifts that have to be edited out, fixes on the fly, heavy on the vocabulary, a lot of accents that are difficult for me. So all these things that are technically challenging. The third or fourth day, I'll be like, what's wrong with me? I'm flopping around. And then I realize that there's this like heavy, it's very taxing. Like, it's actually mentally exhausting, right? So that's a factor. That's the one that I usually am unaware of. What you're saying is when the content of the book is disruptive or possibly triggering. So those it's my job to perform the emotion, but not to be swept away in it. So authentic emotion is appropriate, right? And I'm I'm thinking of a book that I wasn't expecting, that my proofer actually got really triggered, and she's like, I will not do books like this again. I have learned that I have a line. Like, this is a thing I cannot do. This triggered my like childhood abandonment thing. So there are books that I would prefer not to do, make me sad. And I'm constantly interrogating that. Like, if I have that experience and I'm going, why does this bother me? And often the reason that these books are emotional is because the author is trauma processing or giving her readers the opportunity to trauma process, right? Because when you read or listen to a book, you can experience this pain that might be relevant to your own pain, but it's at a safe remove. At any time you can hit pause, you can shut the book. This is a controlled experience, but it's trauma processing where you visit this experience that that perhaps you have had and move through it, hopefully. And also it's a way of being seen, right? Where an author is saying to the reader, I see you. That your pain is valid. And so these books can make me sad when because I wish it were not true, I guess. And it's actually more relevant in straight romance, where there's whole genres of dark romance and bully, and there are behaviors in the plot that nobody that I don't want for anybody, really, but I understand that it is useful. It's a controlled environment to process and fantasize, and that is my job, to perform that. I am sad that that people need that, and I wish everybody were better, were healthy, and didn't need to visit pain, that didn't have pain. But here we are. That's not realistic. There's a reason why we have to explore trauma in writing and in reading, in consuming the books.
Yeah, and I do find more of the bully romances and the dark romance in the heteronormative fiction world, but I'm starting to see it slip into the queer world quite frequently. And the psychology behind why those books are intriguing and interesting and people want to read them is absolutely fascinating to me, because I don't have much desire to read any of them. For the same, I think probably for the same reason that you're kind of like, this is not healthy in any capacity. And I don't wish that kind of relationship on for anybody.
Well, I'm not saying that it's not healthy to read.
Yeah,
But it's not, in my opinion, it's less than ideal. I would not want to have a relationship as described.
Right. The relationship dynamics is what I meant within the character, within the book is what is not healthy. The reading part is definitely healthy. Like, I don't think I've ever had somebody say that reading is unhealthy or seen somebody who reads an unhealthy amount. Don't say challenge accepted, anybody, please.
In queer writing, to make a generalization, I feel like it's much more conscious and deliberate, and self-aware even, of that trauma processing. Again, I mean, all of that is what my interpretation of, from what all that I've read and performed, that I believe that is the function that it's fulfilling.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's just in queer fiction, we are a bit more aware of the gender dynamics and the societal and cultural lessons, I guess, that we've been taught growing up about gender dynamics. Because
I also wonder whether it's because we have a high proportion in the queer book community of own voices writing. Like,
yes,
we tend, do you know what I mean? Like,
in the sapphic world,
yes,
But in the MM world, not so much. There is a lot of straight white women writing MM. Like they are
Yeah,
the
fair point.
overwhelming
Okay, the sapphic
majority.
world. Yeah.
Yeah, in the sapphic world, you have a lot of own voices. I'm not sure I would say that's true in the gay MM world.
Maybe, yeah, maybe it was just like I used the wrong term. Maybe it was more like, because I'm very much, centered in the sapphic world. So, but yeah, I wonder whether that has an impact in the sapphic community, especially because we're writing about the trauma and the experiences and the situations which we found ourselves in or we've experienced, because we're not seeing them written by in other places, especially maybe more in the indie world. Yeah, I mean, like we're writing the stories we want to read because of the stories we relate to.
Yeah, it seems as a whole to be rooted in lived experience.
So you touched on a minute ago about like if a book's content was particularly triggering or something you feel you don't or can't narrate. How does that work if that if something like that crosses your path? How does that work in terms of trying to negotiate that with authors and with the audio publishing companies that you work with?
So I've only refused a book once because of racism. My line is unconscious racism in it, and I was like, I cannot say these words. But as a whole, erotic content or dark content, um, my line is really far back, so I can answer the question in terms of what is generally true, because I know numerous narrators who are like too affected by certain things to be willing to voice them. I'm the one who's willing to voice them. Like I was describing, I see a function in that, and I see that there's a gift being given there between the author and reader, and I'm okay with filling that function. I can step aside from it enough to do that. But anybody who does not feel appropriate to voice content is generally strongly supported in saying that. I mean, best practices, you prep the script early and let them know early so they can recast it. But publishers do not judge you for saying I can't voice this. In fact, you see the language becomes more assertive, like this has certain themes, please be 100% sure before you accept the book, here's the script, so in general, that aspect of mental health is very much supported in the industry, the ability to say no.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Like having that kind of support, it seems like it would make kind of sometimes give you a little bit more confidence to be able to put those lines down, like to draw the lines of what you can will and won't do.
Yeah, it kind of bleeds into the discussion of trigger warnings, right? Or as I prefer to call them, content warnings. And just what constitutes a content warning and what doesn't. And how do you share that with everybody? Obviously, when you're as an author, when you're speaking with a narrator, it gets shared pretty early on and in the discussion process of, hey, I have this book. Here's kind of what it's about. But for readers, they can sometimes get blindsided by it. I think if they're not paying attention. I know I have been blindsided by it. Sometimes to my benefit, sometimes not. Depends on the book.
I think sometimes it is kind of like what is the content warning? where do we draw the line of what we're warning about and what we're not warning about? Because I know some people will put more than others. It's like, okay, well, this is a mystery book, so you're just going to assume that there's murder in it. So how much do you put out there?
Yeah, and I think genre plays a heavy role in that too. I don't know how you feel about that, Aven, but like, I mean, yeah, when you are handed a thriller, you kind of expect a bit more gore, and or if you're handed a horror versus if you're handed a romance. The genre expectations are different.
I feel like I should put a trigger warning before I say this, that I'm going to mention sexual assault. One of the most difficult things I ever read was from a male point of view. In describing the act of rape. After yeah, it just all lit up. The after voicing the female POV of the same experience. Like in this case, and they were originally going to cast it with a male and a female narrator, which brings up a whole other thing, is that male presenting narrators are frequently asked to do these really awful things, right? Like they're asked to embody somebody that they never want to be. They're asked to embody the worst expression of maleness. In this case, they had particularly said, "Oh no, we want you to do both," and that I didn't expect that, and that's one of the worst things that I've ever done. That was rough. It was a bad week, in fact. So I'm now answering the first question of this podcast, but yeah, those are some of the things that.
Well, because you're
I can see
affected by
coming.
it, right? We as
You
authors,
can't not be.
you can't not be.
Yeah.
We as authors are creating an experience, and you as the narrator are taking the experience that we have created and recreating it in a new way. And so then you're creating an experience in a
Mhm.
new way for a listener.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're doing it right,
Yeah.
you want us all to feel, right? Yeah. You want us to experience that, and then you've done it right. You've done it well.
Yeah, sexual assault is the one I was avoiding saying that one because I think that's the one that most people will always put as a trigger warning or a content warning. Sexual assault either on the page or reference to.
Mhm.
And then the other one that I typically always do is on page torture.
Do you write much of that?
Yeah, in my urban fantasy stuff.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Yeah, urban fantasy or
Okay.
science fiction. Not in the
Yes.
romances.
Exactly. Genre specific. Yep.
Yeah. But if I write on page torture, I will usually put that as a content warning. But you do see a lot of content warnings for a lot of different things, and yeah, we don't. I was gonna say we can discuss the word trigger and what that means and how often it's used currently, and if the meaning for it has changed, but that
Yeah,
could be a whole
different episode.
podcast in itself.
You
Yeah,
prefer
that's a
that
whole
content,
other
down.
you
podcast.
said.
Make a note of it.
Discuss the word trigger.
Put that
Don't
down
be
on the
triggery with
list.
the word trigger.
Put that down on the list.
Interestingly, it's a martial word in itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back on topic from trigger. Can you tell us about your experience or expertise in mental health?
Oh, I have no expertise other than my own experience and exploration. So no expertise, but a fair bit of experience. And a lot of it is oh, there's a word for it. When you figure it out, retroactive understanding. when you figure out later, what was going on for you. And my nature is to seek. I would say I'm very curious. I seek the answers. I want understanding. Understanding is how I access and dissolve feelings. And so I have read hundreds of books and done experimented with most modalities, I think, and just personally. I grew up in a coercive control group, born into it. I left at 16. I was homeless. I was assaulted. I barely made it to 21 alive. And I dug myself out of that, not just the external existence, but um, the inner world. I had to bring my inner world out from what was embedded in me, and it was false. It was an illusion, into one in which I can interact with other people in general. Basically, I'm really proud of the work that I've done. I'm really proud that I'm capable of having a conversation, that I'm capable of having a relationship, that I'm capable of orgasm, that I'm capable of crying. I did not cry for something like 18 years, and I was like, this seems to be a thing that humans should be able to do. Like, I should be able to have access to this part of the range of human expression. And
But then also
and it got there.
when you start crying, and then you're like, this feels so weird.
Yes. Well, I remember, and I cried for like 2 days, and I was like, okay, I apparently am going to cry for the rest of my life. I should never have done this. But in fact, it ended, and I just had a backlog. And and now I'm proud of being able to cry when I experience sadness. Like, so I'm just, this is backstory. Recently I've had the experience of medication disrupting my mental health, and also I had difficulties with my guts, and learned how important your gut microbiome is to your mental health. And so, and these things, to learn that something tangible can affect this thing that you think is your identity, can destabilize you that much. It's really threatening. It's destabilizing. It you don't you think you are a certain way, and the way that you are can be changed. um and of course, a trauma, head injury, name it. There's all these other causal things that will alter um your actual brain chemistry. But it results in this feeling of helplessness and loss of agency, that I think are the most, they're just the worst things to deal with. That's my experience of depression and anxiety, of being out of control, of being helpless, of not being able to change the situation, to save yourself. So those, it's a, and then on the other hand, I'm grateful to have had these experiences, because I have grown so much in compassion, and understanding of other people, who go through this for short periods of time and long periods of time. I'm grateful to have access to that, I suppose. I think it's made me a better person. Yeah.
It's such an ongoing and long process too, right? It's never something easy, but for me, having been through somewhat similar, right? Beginning my life in sexual assault and moving forward from there and all the other crap that happens as you do life, you know, it's always ongoing to me. Like it's a process that's never complete. But I think it really does. It opens your heart and the ability to be compassionate to others and also just to be compassionate to yourself, which
Work in progress.
right, you're a work in progress. You know, and that to me, not to spoil a future episode, is the real self-care, right? Is being compassionate to ourselves is the only self-care that we should be doing.
I had an earlier today, I was at the thing. I'm doing EMDR. That's I've done about 4. Are you familiar with it? You're nodding.
I'm familiar with it. I've never really done it. It is not a type of therapy that works well with me. So
Interesting.
yeah. But I know about it. My husband has done it and it works really well with him.
Cool. Yeah. So that's something I'm trying right now. So far, so good. I'm loving the results, even though the how it works is kind of mysterious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a question. And Katie and Amy weren't present for this beginning of this conversation, but it intrigued me and I wanted to bring it back up because I can. So you mentioned when we were in Vegas and highly intoxicated that you can't wait. You can't wait for society until society and culture moves beyond gender. And can you talk more about that and what that looks like for you? Because I am all there for it. And I want that to exist already.
Right? Yes. And the thing is that it's difficult to imagine. So writing my book was an act of discovery of this. And I was critically thinking about what it would look like. And in fact, for my next book, I was like, I want to write from a world where gender doesn't exist. And then I realized all the challenges of doing that, and it would be incomprehensible because it would have to,
in a world where gender does exist.
exactly. So you know, all our English is not a, you know, all our nouns don't have a gender, but so many of our words, it's just embedded in our language. Like it would be difficult to write an English language book and leave out words with a history of gender attribution, for one thing. And then the culture. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to have one culture in the constellation of nation states, whatever, in my future book. I'm going to have one culture that has progressed to that as like a little experiment, a thought where I can visit this. And it'll be a challenge, but maybe not too onerous. And then even writing this last one, I wanted to examine the power, well particularly like the character who feels wrong in the gender they're born in and wishes to be the other, is questioning themselves, like, is my reason for wanting this, for not feeling right, because of the power imbalance, to have access to which of course I'm talking about my experience, right? Like especially growing up the way I did, and when in the religious imprint, I was intended to be a baby maker and a wife and a servant and slave, and that was it. There was no further options. And you know, and I strongly rebelled against that, as one does. But it has always made me question, like, is part of the reason that I have always felt wrong in the born female body, because of what that represents, because of the things that I don't have access to because of it, because of the opportunities that I'm told I cannot have. And then part of my life, you know, is working construction, or a firefighter, and EMT, and like all these male dominated jobs. And I proved to myself and everybody else that gender was a non-issue for me, and I could do all the things no matter what, and no matter what the cost, and I'm gonna muscle in there and and do the things I want because I want to do them, and damn the torpedoes. And your cultural imprints. I'm going to do that. And then after that, I'm like, okay, well, you know, I'm 50 now. I accomplished that. I lived the life that I wanted to, in large part. I had those experiences that I wanted to, in spite of what I was told that I couldn't because of how I was born. And do I still feel wrong? Yes, you know, so lifelong interrogation, um lifelong inner exploration of that, and it's hard to access as well. But I know that all of this pain and difficulty would evaporate if it didn't matter in our society. It's our society that has this binary imprint that everybody's trying to live within or between, and it's causing suffering. And if that imprint weren't there, if that ideology of polarity didn't exist, they would free up so many people and so much energy, and it would heal and allow and accept everybody to just be where they are without having to announce and define and establish themselves and where they fall, and use language to do it, because at the end of the day, it's irrelevant. We're people, and we should all just be able to be people, love other people. The end. That's my
That's your story. In the beginning, it was
that's my
shit.
rant.
In the middle, it was shit. But at the end, people are people and we all love each other. It's fine in the end. No, I love it. I think about that frequently, you know, just I had a hysterectomy after I had my daughter. It was an unexpected hysterectomy, but it really pisses me off how much of my identity was tied to a body part. And I'm like, excuse me, what? That's not okay. I don't like that. But those feelings that have been ingrained in me from birth, because not obviously, my sex identity was not known prior to my birth. So those ideas and social constructs and cultural constructs were not ingrained in me until birth. But since they have been since birth, it just pisses me off. I'm like, why?
You were pissed off at discovering that your attachment to that
Well,
reproductive organ.
yeah, it's not so much. Yeah, I guess I just didn't really think about it, but it's such a big deal. You know, it's made to be such a big deal that this is your identity, is this particular organ in your body. And that just pisses me off because I'm like, that's not who I am. It's a part of who I am, but it's not the whole of who I am. And that didn't really hit me until I had my hysterectomy, because at that point I no longer had it, and I was 29, something like that. I don't remember how old I was. I was below 30. And so, yeah, it was abnormal, right? And I didn't realize it. And I was talking to my mom, who had a hysterectomy when she was like 54 or something. And she's like, yeah, I had that same experience. It wasn't like I was going to go have more kids, but you know, at 54, I'd been told my entire life that this was my purpose, and then it was gone. And she had willingly removed hers, you know, and willingly had the surgery, but it was that same, like, you're pissed off that this is what the culture has identified you as.
I've been pissed off at what I've internalized. I guess that's a form of being pissed off at yourself. But yeah, society tells you that you are a certain thing. The part that annoys me is when I buy into it, when I don't notice it, when I suddenly realize that it's been acting on me for years and I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
was I just got my realization moment then, and pissed me off since, and I still struggle with it. And I'm like, there's no reason to be mad about this.
It pissed me off that it took so long for me to realize because
Me
like
too. Mm-hmm.
yeah, because I think because so not necessarily because, you know, I was never a feminine child. I was never stereotypically, you know, girly. I wasn't ever made to feel like that's who I should have been. But and I've spoken about this before, that like purely because of age considerations, I was the one in the relationship who carried our children. And I hated being pregnant. Like I hated it. But it wasn't until like 3 or 4 years after like I'd had my second child that I went, okay, like I seriously started considering my gender identity and gender expression and stuff. Like I'd always, like I had moments when I considered it, but because for me in those moments I wasn't hugely like repulsed or offended or dysphoric in how I felt, like I told myself that wasn't what it was, because it wasn't a severe enough reaction compared to, you know, like the very valid and very real stories of the, you know, of other people you hear about. And then when I kind of started to accept it and kind of started to go, actually, maybe this is who I am, things like why I really hated being pregnant all of a sudden fell into place. Because the things which were, you know, inherently female about my body were massively exaggerated because of, you know, just biology. And all of a sudden I just like hated everything about it. But it annoyed me that it took that long for me to realize.
All that time. I'm really glad for younger people going through the analysis now. I feel like they have so much more resources available to them, vocabulary and role models, you know, to be able to do it early. But I know that I have so much gratitude, because it seems like the queer community has so much compassion in general for doing it how it you know, for to having your own journey, I guess, and messing up and not doing it right, you know, and figuring it out, and you know, going through the stuff at your own pace. Like there's this my experience is that there's so much compassion for the sloppy figuring it out along the way. So
I maintain that that is one of my favorite things about the younger Gen Z and then Gen Alpha, is just their ability and freedom to explore, and to explore loudly. You know, I have kids at church that'll come up to me and they'll be like, I want to go by this name and this pronoun today. And I'm like, okay, like, don't yell at me if I screw it up, because we're switching this on the fly now and I need to get my brain in order. And my brain is not as quick as yours, but I love it. And then next week they'll be like, no, I'm going to go by this name and this pronoun because that one just didn't really fit me. And I'm like, yes, let's do that. Like, figure out who you are. That's what you're supposed to do when you're that
Fluidity,
age.
yes,
like, be fluid in who you are, and you know what you like. I think for so many other aspects of our lives, no one expects you to make a decision. And this is a generalization. Like I appreciate there's certain, you know, aspects of society where it is expected, but no one expects you to make a decision at like 4, 5 years old and still be living by it when you're, you know,
44.
I don't know, 44 or even 6. Do you know what I mean? Like, so why should our identity and our gender identity be any different?
Well, Katie, we're running low on time.
This is what you get when you start this conversation.
I know, but it's such a good conversation.
It's a really good conversation.
Okay, so I think we're coming up at the end of our time. We do rapid fire questions at the end. I'm going to ask, what is it, 5 questions, and the first thing that comes to your mind, just say it. Don't overthink it. Are you ready?
Oh, I hope so.
What's your favorite source of caffeine?
Coffee.
Finally.
Like 8 of these podcasts and I was starting to give up on the hope that anyone else drank coffee.
Everyone's like, I don't drink caffeine, or, you know, I drink tea.
It's good for you. Coffee, like, yeah. I was
But that's
envying your
not bad.
cup earlier. Yeah. It's like, I should have been prepared.
Well, my cup, just for
Oh, is it a Laney cup? Oh, wow.
Okay, what
Stakes
is
are
your
so high.
dream? What is your dream destination vacation?
Norway.
Ooh. Where did you see kindness today?
You 3.
Oh. What is your philosophy on good mental health?
That there are things that you can do, even when you feel like you can't. I always seek to find a piece of agency, something that I can do to retain agency in my life or in my thought.
Awesome. And where did you find joy this week?
I have a porcupine that lives outside, and I see this porcupine every day. Right now it's snowy. I know it's the first time he has ever experienced snow because he's a juvenile porcupine. He's about the size of a bowling ball. Yeah.
Oh,
Porcupine.
Have you named your porcupine?
Pokey.
okay.
Pokey the porcupine.
That.
Love it. Don't pet him though.
Well, they're mostly fur. They're like 70% fur. I touched his paw.
You gotta go the right way.
Yeah. Well, I won't go behind the head, but I touched his
Go
paw.
against the grain.
Mhm.
I love that.
Oh. That was not the ending I was expecting. So there you go. Okay, folks, that's all for our latest episode of Bookish and Unbalanced. Adrian, Katie, and I would like to thank Aven for sharing with us today. We would also like to thank you, listeners, for tuning in even and getting to know Aven. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to keep up to date with our latest episodes. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. Until next time, take care out there, and remember, we're all in this together.
Now it's
Oh, we got jazz hands this week as well. I don't know why.
It's like, where did the jazz hands come from?
It's been a long week.